Welcome to Culmination. Well, we're not experts, but we sure have a lot to say. In the process of becoming our best self, I have with me the music producer Ryan White, aka nan0wav, to discuss reputation. And with that said, let's get started. So, Ryan, what is a reputation?
Well, that's a great question, Casey. I would define a reputation as the collective view of you as a person from other people.
Hmm.
So, not specifically one person's view of you, but the generalized view of you from most people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so would you mind elaborating on that?
Well, you do have some control over it, but generally it's just based on how other people view you. And what people think about you is going to be based on what you do, but ultimately it's up to other people, not necessarily yourself, I
Hmm.
suppose.
So, do we all have one, if that's the case?
Oh, absolutely. If you've ever interacted with somebody, you're building your reputation.
And is it something that exists, or is it more or less like a perception?
It's a perception. It's a perception that has very real consequences, but it's definitely just a perception.
Huh. So let's dive into those consequences. How does it affect us?
Well, I'm sure you've heard the phrase of so and so's reputation precedes them. If you know about somebody's reputation before you meet them, you're going to be biased on how you interact with them. Like, if I hear about this crazy guy, Casey, who goes around and does all these great things for people, I'm going to be nice to him when I first meet him because I think that he's a great guy. Whereas if Casey's general reputation is, oh, Casey's this real mean guy who like yells at old people or something, then I'm going to be less receptive to Casey's ideas and probably not as happy to interact with him.
So it almost is like a gauge and everything.
Yeah, it's a set of perceptions that other people have made that interfere with how you're going to interact with somebody, I suppose.
So now that we've kind of framed it from like kind of how others view us, like this reputation, how do we create a reputation of somebody that we know?
Well, for me, I always feel like a reputation is hearing things from other people about this one person. It's not necessarily I am building somebody else's reputation because that's just judgment of another person, I suppose.
Well, wouldn't it be judgment?
Well, yeah, definitely. But it's the mixture of every person's judgments, I guess. Like a reputation is I was saying this earlier, but not
Hmm.
very verbosely. It's a generalized judgment of one person. It's the mixture of a community's judgments, I
Hmm.
suppose.
I see. So I don't know. It's very interesting because on one hand, it's like I do see it like that, but I'm not sure. Like it feels like it could be defined in a few ways. But one way, I guess, to name an example is like say somebody in band or something with a reputation of almost being like the teacher's pet or something, like always there on time to rehearsals, always good etiquette, responsible, accountable, stays after to like clean up or whatever, like just this perfect person. Is that defined by a collective, like the whole band's view of them, and that gives them a reputation? Or is reputation almost more personal, where it's like they have this reputation to me when I have a shallow connection to them, and all I see is this like responsible stuff they're doing? Versus like, what about my friend who knows them well, and maybe there's somebody who really struggles inside, but I don't see that. So they would have a different reputation to them. So what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I guess that is another way to look at it. but there's definitely a better word than reputation for personal, that personalized view of somebody else. It's not coming to mind right now, but I think there's a better term than reputation for that. But I guess you could lump it in
Hmm.
with that.
So you're thinking more like a legacy then.
Yeah, I guess. Like, whereas a legacy is actual deeds or accomplishments or actions that somebody has made, whereas a reputation is more of like a legacy of attitude, I suppose.
Hmm. What do you mean by attitude?
Well, this band person you were talking about who's got the attitude of a teacher's pet or a goody two shoes or whatever you want to call it. That's their attitude. And that attitude, that perceived attitude, is being stored in a group's reputation of that person, I
Hmm.
suppose.
So you think it mainly forms on attitudes or actions?
I guess both. If it were like strictly actions, it would be, as you said, a legacy. Because
Hmm.
actions are concrete. You can say as a fact, this person stayed after band class and helped clean up.
Yes.
That's fact, but reputations aren't based entirely in fact.
Hmm. Okay. That yeah. Keep going. That's a good way to differentiate.
Reputation is based on perceptions. So it's less of this person stayed after and more of this person stayed after because they're trying to get on the teacher's good side. It's the perception of why somebody might have chosen to do an action. The action definitely matters, but it's not the defining characteristic of a reputation, I suppose.
Ah, and it goes back to that bias statement that you said too, because it's almost like a predicting value. It's like if I know this reputation and I can kind of understand their intention, I can almost predict their behavior and therefore I will act accordingly.
Absolutely. And that is called a self fulfilling prophecy in psychology terms, where your expectations of somebody else change your actions towards them. Okay, this is like a standard example of a self fulfilling prophecy. Let's say we have a teacher, and this teacher is getting a new group of students, and some other teacher tells the teacher, hey, this group of students is like, they're not the brightest. And the teacher then says, oh, well, if these students aren't the brightest, then I'm going to treat them as if they need extra help, as if they're
Hmm.
not as smart as other students I might have. And then the teacher will like give them extra work to help them hone their skills or whatever. And then the students will get the idea that, oh, this teacher thinks that we're not that smart. And then they will act accordingly. And at the end of the day, even though these students may have been completely average, because the teacher treated them like they're less than average, they became less than average. So
Right.
that's like exactly what reputation does, I think. But it's not always negative, of course.
Yeah, and it's just so weird when you think about reputation as everybody, myself, yourself, everybody else has a reputation. We didn't exactly choose that reputation, but based on our actions and our intentions, we people basically need a way to gauge who we are. Like as humans, we need to classify things because the world would be too uncertain if we didn't do that, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
And it's like a quick way to gauge someone's personality, I suppose.
mhm. Yeah, and it's just interesting how with the self-fulfilling prophecy, how even though these things aren't necessarily controlled by us directly, keyword directly, it can therefore, if we think about it too much or are treated accordingly based on somebody's either true or false perception of us, that can affect our own vision of ourselves directly.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And for me, I try pretty hard to maintain a good reputation in more ways than one, I guess.
Hmm.
So, again, I'm a music producer. I kind of try to have like some semblance of branding, I guess.
Plug.
So, yeah, here we go. In my online presence, I am very careful about what I say and what I do, or what I don't say and don't do, because that reputation determines like if people are actually going to consume my product,
Hmm.
I guess. So I never really talk about politics in my online presence. I try to just be, I don't know, a
Like
presence that's,
clean.
I wouldn't say that. Maybe, I mean, I use plenty of profanity and stuff
Well,
in my
like
online
clean as
presence.
in
But
maybe you curse or whatever, but you're not like actively seeking a fight, or you're not like doing bad things or inflicting harm, or you
yeah,
know.
absolutely. That's a good way to put it. I try my best to appear as a good person. I mean,
Yeah.
am I a good person? I'm not the one to judge that, but I try
Reputation.
my best to appear that way.
Hmm.
And then when I'm speaking to someone in an interpersonal relationship instead of, I don't want to call that a professional relationship because it's not supposed to feel professional, but that's essentially what it is, I
Yeah.
guess.
Or it's something to compare to.
Yeah. Whereas when I'm in like a personal relationship with someone and I'm interacting with them, I'm less careful about my reputation, I guess.
Hmm.
Because my reputation with other people should be reflective of who I am.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't be fair to essentially lie about it, I guess.
And I think just in general, connections, like you have to evaluate and understand what connections you have with people. Like you're going to have some people that are close friends that you're more comfortable with yourself towards. There's a sense of trust. So even if you do say something ratchet or obscene, even, like they still know you're a good person because they know you and there's a sense of trust, you know? um
Yeah,
versus like running a business or branding yourself. Like you're selling a product essentially, and you're running a whole show here to people you don't necessarily know. Like you might come in contact with some of these people directly, but you don't truly know them. You don't know their reputation or anything, so you can't predict their behavior. Maybe they're cool if they knew the true you. Maybe they're not, you know? And it's not, and let me clean that up a bit. Like it's not like you're hiding your true self. You're just trying to it's different when you're branding, you know?
yeah, because as a music producer, I guess my product isn't only music. People tend to get involved with like bands and bands' personal lives, I guess, which
Yeah.
is kind of an alarming trend on its own. But
Just like a general
I'm
influencer appeal.
Yeah, yeah. As an influencer, it's important to consider yourself as a product, I suppose. You
Hmm.
want to appear as desirable in a social circumstance where if somebody supports you, they're not going to get called out for supporting a bad person, I guess.
Yeah, or just the idea of like you want to sell yourself in the sense of like this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I believe in terms of like I believe in music and the good vibes, and if you agree with me or you support that, like maybe you'll enjoy this music too. Or if you enjoy the music like the other way around, it's like maybe you want to support me. So I can make better music for everybody, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, that's my personal story of reputation, I suppose. I'm much more careful in my online presence than I am in real life, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say something, but I was like, I'm not really sure what to say. But I guess moving on here, you mentioned like a comment, or you didn't mention, you made a comment of like, I don't know if I'm a good person or not. Like, I guess it's up to my reputation. I don't know if that was word for word what you said, but something along that lines. Um, in my view, I believe that like your acknowledgement of yourself, the way you view yourself, and basically like my knowledge of who I am would be considered my identity. And as we described in this episode, kind of the opposite of how everybody else views me or the judgment of my actions, that's a reputation. So, what is the let's break this down, you know? Like what's the difference per se?
Well, I think you put it perfectly. Identity is the true self, I guess. Your
From your
identity is
perspective.
who you truly are. And it's hard. You can have a sense of identity, you can have a sense of who you are, but there's always going to be parts that you're missing. So I consider identity to be like absolute zero, I suppose. You can get a
Mhm.
really good idea of what your true identity is, but you can never actually reach the full truth, I
It's like a
guess.
census, you know? Like you can take a census of the entire population of the United States of people who like vanilla ice cream. And if you got literally every single person, that would be the truth. But because you can't do that, because that's arduous and there's going to be bias of like non-response bias where they just don't respond to your survey or whatever, or they're not there or they moved or something, or they're hiding. I don't know. Uh, so we have to rely on samples to gauge kind of like an estimator for the truth. So it's kind of like that. Like all we have are estimates. So I'm glad you put it like that.
Yeah. So your sense of identity is what you see yourself to be. And then a reputation is how others are interpreting your identity, whether that be, whether that be true or not, I guess.
Hmm.
And then we also briefly talked about self-esteem before the show.
Yes.
Um, and then self-esteem is your emotions on your identity, I suppose.
Yeah, or just kind of like how you feel about yourself, how comfortable you are, just overall mental health, I guess.
So yeah, the sense of identity is the personal reflection of identity, and a reputation is the interpersonal representation of your identity.
So here's the thing that I want to get at. Since we know ourselves better than others will ever know us, just because of our complex thoughts that we have, like we all have thoughts and the way our minds work and our preferences, our priorities, our values, our moral systems, like literally everything is different. Even like our experiences, the things we've learned over time, like education in general, the things we've been exposed to, media, news, everything. like uh how like we other people can never know that side of you to that, or they can never know you to that extent that you know yourself. But is there any value, or wait, let me say this first. Because people, like let's say me and you, I can never truly know you from that level, that perspective. Is there any merit behind how I view you, even when this estimator, this reputation, because I'm just trying to get a general perception of who you are, it's so far off from the truth, but is it? And that's my question.
That is a really good question. So, in general, reputations tend to be a very, very watered down version of the true identity. However, there is merit in actually knowing your reputation. Think about, like, this is going to be a really silly metaphor, but
Yeah.
when you're recording your own voice and then you play it back to yourself, and
Hmm.
then you hear qualities that you just never would have noticed before. So
Yeah.
when you're thinking to yourself and you're doing things, there's going to be qualities and actions that you make that are going to be completely unnoticed by you, but other people do notice them. And then hearing your reputation through other people's lenses, I guess, is like hearing your own recording played back to you.
Yeah,
They pick up on frequencies that you might not have. So there's definitely merit to knowing your reputation because other people are going to pick up on parts of yourself that you never would have noticed.
true. Although it's kind of tricky at the same time though, because it's like consider an example like this where you're let's say you're with friends at a pretty normal event, like you're getting ice cream with them. I don't know what's with me and ice cream. It's just a readily available food on my mind, I guess. Or like I don't know, you're just or maybe you're getting coffee with friends and there's like four of you and you're kind of like weird. Like you're kind of like the awkward guy who's like your body language is kind of tense and like you're just awkward. So maybe they might get the idea that maybe or I don't know, like their minds could run wild because they don't truly know the answer. It's like, "Oh, maybe you have a crush on one of the people in the group. Maybe you saw a really scary movie the other night and you're traumatized. Maybe like you could just have infinite guesses of why you're awkward, but but then the truth is only
That's just
you
how
will
you
know the
are.
truth, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's one issue with reputations is, oh boy, bringing another psychology term in here. What's it called?
Ooh.
Oh, what is it? Oh, it's the
Spotlight effect?
actor observer bias, I think is what it's
Okay.
called, where people tend to make judgments based on people's actions that
Yeah.
assume that people do things because that's the way that they are, instead of
Mhm.
that's the situation that they're being put in. So think about the last time you were like out driving and someone cut you off. And you're probably thinking, wow, what a jerk. That person's probably just not a great person for cutting
Yeah,
me
yeah.
off. Whereas think of the last time you might have cut somebody off because you're late or you're stressed out, not because
Mm.
you're a bad person.
And it's like, sorry, oh, sorry, sorry, even though they can't hear you.
Yeah. So I guess that ties in to only you truly know why you're doing something or why you are the way that you are, I guess. And
Right.
a reputation is based on other people's lenses, other people's views of you, which are all subject to the actor observer bias, where they think that you might be doing something because you're this way, not because something that may have happened to you on that day or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that
But
really answered your question, but
well, no, it makes sense just because it's like you can't truly as the observer, it's like you need to try to understand the situation. Like, this isn't normal for my friend to be shaken here. Like, if I'm one of the friends, like I'm switching roles here and I'm like looking at the guy who's super awkward and everything, it's like, what's going on here? Like, and you're friends with this guy, so you're actually concerned. It's not like just weird to you and you're curious. It's like, oh, this is weird. Like, what's going on? Um, but unless the person who's awkward explicitly says what's going on, like, "Oh, I'm I'm really cold because it's cold in here" or something, or I don't know, like maybe
too much
actual
caffeine.
trauma. What'd you say?
Too much caffeine.
Yeah, yeah, or that.
That'll
It's
do it
like
to me.
it's like unless they convey that message, the
Then there's
observer
no
will
way
never
to
truly know.
actually know. And
Yeah.
that's one of the main reasons that reputation does tend to be this really diluted version of someone's true identity, is because there's all of these factors that just aren't considered or can't be figured out.
Hmm.
Because, like you, going back to this band kid example,
Yeah.
like you said, um, this kid who's everyone thinks is a teacher's pet may be desperate for like validation or something. And
Yes.
nobody can know that, but because they don't know that, the reputation becomes something negative of, oh, they just want to get good grades from the teacher or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of a there's an episode I did on status, which I brought up this theme as well, where it's like you see an ultra mega billionaire or something for an example. Really just insert any successful person, whether that's success in wealth or like acting or something. And it's like, oh wow, like what a pretentious like asshole basically, you know? Like they're so pompous, they're so egotistical or whatever. And it's like you as the observer, it's like you don't know anything about them other than like just seeing them on the top. But it's like you ignore or just haven't seen the climb that they had. And some people, to be fair, like disclaimer, like some people were just like born into acting roles or something. Some people inherited wealth and like yeah, I'll give you that. I don't want to just like ignore situations where that's not applicable, but for the sake of what I'm saying, or like maybe if you know that, that's how you view them differently, you know? Um, but usually there's a story behind everything, and we just don't really know it because it's lost in translation, or we just don't bother to look, or they don't tell us or convey this message. But it's important to be kind of open-minded and try to search for the truth because if not, then we just kind of judge based on preconceptions, essentially.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. There is always a story, and most conflicts occur when people don't know the full story, I guess.
Hmm.
Knowing
Right. Yeah.
the reasons for someone's actions is like so important for interpersonal relationships.
Hmm.
Um, I can't think of any examples off the
Oh
top
wait,
of my head.
I've got something. I got something.
Go ahead.
It's like have you ever heard those like moral dilemmas where it's like question like the trolley problem for an example, something like
Yeah.
that. Well, it's not that, but it's like the classic. There's a bakery, and there's like a really unkempt kid who steals bread, and he's like in poverty and he steals bread, and the chef like runs after him and everything, and it's like the moral dilemma is like who's in the wrong and who's in the right per se because it's like with added context it's like well let's take the chef himself or the baker I should say they to give it backstory that I'm making up right now it's like they were really troubled as a kid but managed to work hard and saved enough money and loved to bake and ended up making a whole brand off of that and ended up like they're a good small business owner. They came from nothing. So it's it's kind of bad that
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. And knowing the full story is, again, like in that situation, the baker doesn't know that the kid's in poverty. To the baker, the kid's just like some guy stealing bread. He's literally just taking money away from the baker, and that's not fair to the baker. But to the kid, this chef, this baker guy, he has it made. He's rich. He's got this whole business going. He doesn't need this one loaf of bread. And this kid's going to starve if he doesn't get it. So from both points of view, they're in the right. And I guess that's one of the main problems with reputations is it's based on people's perceptions and not the truth.
yes. Well,
Yeah.
also that's a weird word to use in a situation like this. It's like the truth. What is the truth? Or like the truth is certainty in what we know. We know both of these people's backstories. Oh, and also side note, seriously, thank you for finishing that because most times when like the dogs start barking, it's like I have to cut that out or something. But you just like finish the story in a really nice way that I intended upon. So good work.
Thank
Um,
you.
but anyway, what I was saying is the truth is what we know. Like we know these backstories, but can we really decide what's right? Because if we, let's say we defend the kid, if we defend the kid, then it's like, okay, well then shouldn't all of people in poverty just be able to steal based on that? And it's like, well,
Ooh.
no. But then if you defend the baker, then it's like, what about all these people who starve? It's like you see the problem with these.
Yeah,
I
I
love
do.
these moral dilemmas because they're interesting, but I also hate them.
Because
They
they're,
just
yeah,
suck.
because it opens avenues like that.
Yeah, and you can't win. You really can't win.
Yeah, that's something that always like I am constantly thinking about that actually. Just how am I misinterpreting someone else's actions, I
Hmm.
guess.
Right, and thankfully we're not always pressed for a moral dilemma. I mean, sometimes we
I
are,
mean,
but
yeah. So I guess reeling back into reputation, honestly, for the most part, of course there's exceptions to this, but I do not see having a reputation as a good thing. I see it as negative. It has
negative.
negative connotations to me.
Yeah, I can see a negative connotation. I mean, maybe that's what it is.
So having like obviously having a bad reputation is going to like, that's going to hinder you. It's going to hinder your success.
Yes.
Whether that be actually like, making money, which I do not define success as, or being happy or talking to other people or whatever. Having a
Hmm.
bad reputation is going to hurt. That's going to make that more difficult.
Yeah.
Whereas having a good reputation, that just gives you a longer distance to fall, I guess. In my perfect world, I could go into any conversation where nobody has a preconceived notion of who I am and they can make their own decisions about me based on what I do or say and
Hmm.
not based on what they're already thinking about me before I even interact with them at all.
Right.
That's what I would prefer, but obviously that's not how the world works.
Hmm. But I mean,
And
we're just so interpretive and we're just trying to understand. And
yeah,
sometimes it's like, think about the people who they're depressed or they're really angry at the world because maybe the world took things, or not literally, the world took things from them, but they believe that just because their circumstances have been tragic. Like, for instance, just like the death of a loved one. Like, they feel when malevolence strikes, it's like, sometimes you're left with what do I do? Especially when you don't understand the situation or when it's purely based on like nothing, not like a tornado or any natural disaster, but like somebody consciously inflicted harm on one of my loved ones. Like this wronging of someone. So this creates this basically this turmoil and could result to somebody hating the world basically. So with that said, I could understand somebody having a preconceived notion against somebody. It's like they could view somebody with a quote unquote better life. I mean, they don't understand that person's experiences or whatever, which is unfair, but like for the sake of storytelling, they understand from their reputation, the way that they view this one person. Maybe it's the band kid tying it back. Like, oh, look how well put together they are. I bet they've never dealt with what I've dealt with. So they hate them automatically.
mm,
Can you really? I agree with you in the sentiment of in a perfect world, we wouldn't have preconceived notions. I mean, I'm just gonna like say flat out, I would love that too, Like who wouldn't want that? But think about why that doesn't exist?
yeah, it's just people. It's scary to go into a conversation with no preconceived notions. Because, like, if I, for this podcast, I guess, if I had never spoken to you before and I knew nothing about you, I
Yeah,
probably would not be as open as I actually am. So,
right, that's
reputations
a good
can
point.
definitely be a good thing. Because, Casey, you have a reputation of being a trustworthy and level headed guy. And I mean, I know that to be true.
Well, I appreciate that.
I know that to be true because I know you. But if I
Hmm.
didn't have that, then this podcast session would not be going as well as it is. Not to
Hmm.
get like meta or anything, but
Meta. Well, maybe I had a maybe if you didn't know me but you watch some of the other episodes, it's like you can kind of form that idea too.
Yeah, that's true. But it wouldn't be,
I do see your point then.
yeah. It's more of like having a preconceived notion about somebody does help you know what's appropriate in a given situation, I suppose.
Right. And there's also I just described an entire scenario of like, like the person who hates the world from the world wronging them in their view. Um, Now I'm gonna spin it on its head, all right?
Oh boy. Okay,
What
okay.
about kind of like the Anne Frank sentiment of, at least, I don't know if that's original to her or if that's like just a thing, but the idea that people are born good or inherently good. So in this example, it's
From
like
a
somebody
humanistic
who just
perspective,
views everybody as better than they are. How do you
oof,
think that world would look like?
that would not be a good world. That would be very, very bad. Because imagine, um,
I guess it's just innocence in a sense.
as someone who tends to be more cynical,
Hmm.
a world where everyone is innocent is not a good world. Because imagine there's someone being elected into a political position or
Yes.
a position of power, and this is not a good person.
Yes.
But everyone thinks, oh, well, they're doing these bad things because they're put in a bad situation, and not they're doing these bad things because they're a bad person, and then because of that, this bad person gets elected to a position of power and then does bad things. That's like the first thing that comes to mind when I think of a world where it's all innocence. And that's why I think it wouldn't be any good. But I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
So like innocence, just a world of innocence.
Yeah. A world where reputations are all positive, I guess.
Well, there's a lot I could say because there's just a lot there because when I think of innocence, it's like in the sense that you just described, it sounds like you're using it synonymous with the word of ignorance.
Hmm.
Am I correct?
Yeah, a little bit.
Uh, yeah. Although I definitely see that side of innocence because it's like innocence is essentially being shielded by
It's
harsh
naivety in a
realities.
sense.
Yeah. Um, I think one of my thoughts is just like I think about childhood where, if people grow up and they have a good childhood of like decently innocent, but like kind of exposed to the world at a pace that is comfortable, quote unquote, uh, like decently
Mm.
enough, like they learn at a good, mature pace rather than like at age 5 they learn what sex is and drugs and violence. Like,
You're exposed to that stuff gradually.
yes, exactly. Like it's not all at once or at a young age, but if you are exposed at a young age, it's like definitely that. Like, I guess the point I'm getting at is innocence has its purpose because if if this ozone layer of innocence was just removed all of a sudden, then the sun rays of malevolence and basically absolute cynicism would destroy us instantly.
Yeah.
So we kind of need that's kind of the whole basis of the idea of innocence is bliss. I don't I don't know if I truly agree with that statement just because I personally like to pursue the truth even if it puts me in weird situations. But I definitely see where it comes from. Because why, as humans, we can't deal with exponential change all at once. I mean, we're put in situations. I mean, think about a wartime situation where it's like at any moment you could get shot or like blown up or any other violent thing all at once and you're stuck in a trench or maybe you die from trench foot or something. I don't know. Uh, I don't know my diseases too well, but but you know what I mean. Or even like with the pandemic, it's like with all of this stuff going on, everything shutting down all at once, it's like that can create some uncertainty, some like when things happen so fast and you're not ready for it, it can put you in a really weird place. Sometimes you do have to rise to the challenge, and you always have to get back up. But that doesn't make it any less difficult, you know? So I would
Right.
say innocence has its purpose.
Yeah, it definitely does, but too much of anything is bad.
Too much
So,
of anything is bad. Yeah, it would be
except ice cream. But
I I don't know, it's tricky because I don't agree with the idea that the world is just all bad. Like humans are all bad, everything's malevolent. The world is just run by a deep state of pedophiles. Like I don't agree with I don't know about this okay, that was a bit extreme, but you know.
yeah, I
It's
mean, I was gonna bring that up actually, is my idea of like, oh, it's this bad person running for a position of power. Generally, I don't like to believe that there are that many bad people out there. I
mhm.
subscribe to the idea that just like you should subscribe to this channel. I
Yeah,
subscribe to
okay.
the.
I was thinking
Sorry,
that.
sorry, sorry, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah,
I
yeah, good.
subscribe to the idea that 99.9% of people are good people who are doing what they think is right. But what they think of as right may be skewed or different or just outright wrong, I guess.
Let me
So it may
challenge that.
appear that they're evil
What do you
or
mean
bad.
by good? What defines good?
Oh boy, here we go.
What is good? Yeah, we're going there, Ryan.
We're
We're
going
going
there. We're
there.
going there. What does define good? That is such a difficult question. I would say the ability to bring joy to another person in a general term,
Hmm.
I guess. That's what I would define as good, is to bring joy to another person, but not at the expense of another.
But what about the baker and the kid?
Well, I guess good is a relative term there because for the baker, getting that kid to give him the bread back is good because he's going to get more money by selling that bread, and then with that money, he can expand his bakery and help more people by giving them food.
Hmm.
So, from his point of view, it's good. But from the kid's point of view, it's good to steal the bread and to get away with it because the kid's helping his family and he's improving their lives by making them not starve.
But aren't both scenarios at the expense?
Yes. But personally, I would side with the kid on this one because the expense of a bakery losing out on a loaf of bread is that outweighs the expense of a family starving.
Hmm.
But that's just my opinion on it. And there's a whole loophole that you brought up earlier where, well, why don't we just let impoverished people steal then?
Yeah, yeah. And honestly, like I don't really know what my thoughts are just because I don't know. And I guess I'll stay neutral for the sake of the podcast in general because I honestly don't want like this is a message to the viewer, I guess. Like I don't want you to hear my thoughts of like, oh, here's a moral dilemma here. This is what I think, so you should think it too.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
that's a good point.
well, I'm glad you said your opinion because honestly, like everybody's going to have their opinion, you know? And
Yeah.
like that's interesting to note in general. And also that gives insight of maybe the kind of person you are, you know? Like maybe you, I
I'm
don't
the
know,
type of
maybe you're
guy who
just
just
a
steals
very,
bread, dude.
maybe you're just a very empathetic person, you know? Like that could be the reputation that the viewer like gets from you when they listen, you know?
Yeah.
Tying it back.
Yeah, yeah, bringing it back.
But
You're
yeah,
really good at
I
that.
definitely don't mean to preach though. So I don't know. I just like I like this show because it presents all these
It's supposed to
concepts
be
and ideas
it's
without
presenting
being, huh?
it's presenting platforms for thought, not just here's
Yeah,
the right thing to do or think.
because it's like, aren't there too many platforms that are like, here's my opinion. Don't you care about it? I'm sure you don't.
Yeah, but
Uh,
there's always more ways to think about a scenario and what's right or what's wrong because the whole concepts of right and wrong, it's relative to each person, I
right,
guess. My definition of right is helping another person but minimizing the expense of others is I can guarantee it's different from your definition or whoever's watching this video.
right, yeah.
And you can, yeah, I don't know how to tie that back to reputation, but
Well, I mean, think about how that affects like if our if our morals are a certain way and morals are created by experiences or interactions or the things we learned over time, that's going to affect our reputation or that's going to impact our reputation of how others see us because it's like we act almost in accordance that conveys this idea, but also we view others a certain way. Like for instance, you might hate somebody, maybe hate's a strong word, but like you might not, you might have a certain reputation, perception of somebody, or I gotta phrase this correctly. You might see somebody with a reputation of negative if they believe in, or if they like said something or do something that maybe goes against your definition of something that you find personally valuable, you know?
yeah.
Like, oh, this guy doesn't like Pokemon. Like, guess I won't talk to him.
Yeah, reputation, personal reputation, where it's my reputation of you, not a collective reputation,
Hmm.
is based on me holding you to my standards for good.
Yes.
And that is inherently flawed because our definitions of good are different. And your, I hesitate to use the word true now, but
Yeah.
your true alignment of good or evil or whatever is different from the way that I might interpret it, I guess.
Yeah, and back to that idea of the truth. It's like, remember how we said earlier in this episode how like a reputation is almost like a gauge of somebody, like try to gauge how someone truly is as a person.
Yeah.
It's like how it's one thing we already explained that you can never understand the truth based alone on the fact that they will always know more than they'll let on, and it's impossible to convey certain things because it's lost in translation and all that. So that's one like clear reason why you can never know a true form of somebody. But now we have another example of why you can never know the true you can never know the true self of somebody. It's because we're biased.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
feel like bias is a word that's like
It's like
thrown
a,
around a lot now, especially just like in a very polarized political setting, but kind of staying away from that. It's just like the idea that like let's just kind of face it, like we're just biased creatures. And we're
oh,
biased because
absolutely.
we interpret things. And as we've been saying this whole time, we all have entirely different moral systems, entirely different right or wrong ideas of things. So that by consequence, we can never see the truth because we view somebody as we want to view them or as we view them based on our conceptions of good and evil. But
And
then
that's
because of that, you'll never find the truth. But because everybody's so subjective, is there even a truth? Ah!
uh, and that and that's all that a reputation is it's just a bias on how you're looking at somebody. And that's why I'm again, not to put my views on the viewer or
Hmm.
anything, but That's why I generally have negative connotations associated with um, reputation, is because
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
an interference with judgment. It's a filter to your perception of somebody. And
Yeah,
I
no.
always try to look at things with as few filters as I can.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah.
Reputation may be, it may actually be negative. Like it may be a negative connotation, but I think for the sake of this video, I think it's just a neutral thing. And I say neutral because you can't really get rid of it. It's just a thing that exists. Like it will always exist and it serves a purpose. But
Yeah.
sometimes reputations are good because they can help you with branding, or like if you have a good reputation, then people will like you. And that also encourages you to be a better person because then you'll be more recognizable, more likable, and maybe opportunities follow suit when you reach that criteria.
And you want
But
to
it can
live up
also
to
be
your good
bad.
reputation.
What was
Sorry.
that?
You want to live up to your good reputation. It pushes you to be a better person.
Yeah, exactly. There was this chapter that I read in Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, where one of the rules is simply give somebody a reputation to live up to. So it's like instead of criticizing somebody for like being like let's say you're eating at a fast food restaurant, you're getting burgers with your bro, and they just eat like a pig, like they're just disgusting, or like it's just a vile scene to see them eat that burger because it like their hands are all greasy. Okay, maybe I'm gonna stop describing this in case the
I
viewers
think
are
we got the
eating
idea.
or something. Yeah, I think at least somebody in your life
Oh,
who's
I
like
do.
that.
I do.
Uh, but it's like instead of saying, "Wow, dude, you eat like a pig," like chew with your mouth closed, or like something snarky or something condemning, it's like you say something along the lines of like, uh, let me try to think of a good example of like, or it's good, or I always try um, to eat with, I don't know, better manners or something because I don't know, it helps me get the ladies or something. I don't know. I can't, to tell you the truth, I don't really know a good example right now of what you can say, but the idea is you don't condemn them, but give them an opportunity to have a reputation in your mind that's like, I know you can be better than this. I know you can eat this less disgustingly. If that's a word. Um, and then they kind of take a hint that, they're eating kind of disgustingly. There I am using that adverb again. But
Yeah, it's posing the problem in a more positive light and
right, and
saying,
they take it upon themselves to fix it because it's like, oh, well, I want to have better manners because they would view me better if I did, and also it's better if I do.
yeah,
Although
that's a good way to put
sometimes those burgers there's no pleasant way to eat them. Let's be real here.
it. I don't know if you've got like the foil around it.
Okay, that's fair.
That's the winning move right there.
Okay. I see
Anyway,
what, yeah. My problem is everything, all the contents slide off the burger when I'm eating
oh
it.
man, they just slide right at the back. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
That's
like
what the
just bite
foil's there
down
for.
harder. And it's like, what do you mean? I'm trying to bite down harder. These tomatoes and especially shredded lettuce. I
Oh,
can't stand shredded lettuce, bro. Just give me like like two sliced things that like cover the size of the patty. Just put them on there. Bam. Stop shredding it. When you shred it, it gets everywhere. And then I have to like use my finger to individually pick them up.
ugh.
Maybe this isn't good for my reputation.
No, 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 no. I totally understand. I totally get it. We've
I
all
did
been in
not
that
mean to become a
situation, picking
food
up the
critic.
pieces of lettuce all around us.
Yeah. Um. But anyway, criticisms aside.
Yeah, I do think that it's always a good idea to phrase um, whatever quandaries you might have with somebody in a more positive
Ooh,
way.
big word.
I mean, it's like two syllables, but
It's still.
it's like a medium word.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
But it's always better to phrase those in a positive way and say something more along the lines of, "Hey, you I believe that you can do this better. Here are some ways how," instead of just saying, "You're bad."
Because when you say you're bad, there's no room to grow from that. It's like, okay, I'm bad, but what does that mean? Like,
Yeah, it's
what
the
am
whole thing of like positive constructive criticism, I
yeah.
guess.
Or I guess just constructive. Isn't constructive criticism already kind of positive?
It's supposed to be, but people don't
No.
really use it that way.
Well, then it's just criticism, I guess.
Yeah.
I say as a joke sometimes, it's like when someone asks me, like, can you give me constructive criticism on this? It's like, do you want some deconstructive criticism? Just blatant ad hominems. That's
Yeah.
smart joke for being asshole.
Uh,
Man. So anyway, I gotta be collected again. I became Mr. Funny Man for a second, but
what do you mean you became? You already were, dude.
Woo.
Come on,
um,
Case.
so what do you think is the big takeaway, Ryan, of
Well,
this reputation episode?
reputation is a thing. It's something you have always, and it's something you should always be considerate of, and I guess careful about maintaining if you want to get ahead, I guess. And you're not going to always have full control of your reputation. People will base their perceptions of you based on their own experiences and their own morals and all of that, and you can't control that, so there's no point in even trying, I guess. But at the same time, you're in control of your own actions, which influence that. Anyway, you can control your reputation, but not perfectly. And your reputation is not always going to be a bad influence on who you are. It can be a standard that you hold yourself to. Or it can be but it can also be a hindrance. It can be something that other people are holding you to, and then when you don't succeed, they see you as worse than they thought. And a reputation should I was going to say something, but I just totally forgot what it was.
Well, let me say this. You can't always control the reputation, like you said. But I think an easy way to just kind of live your life with this whole idea is just be yourself in the sense of be genuine and honest with who you are. Do what you like to do. Don't let don't let false condemnations, if that's how you say that. Like don't let people's negativity or criticism tear you down. Maybe there's merit to criticism sometimes, and sometimes it's important to face yourself when that comes. But in the end, we might not be able to control reputation directly, but we should just be who we are. We need to figure out ourselves, our identity, who we want to be. And if we can present that in a way that makes us feel comfortable under our own skin and happy to be ourselves, and also like good people who are good to others, good to ourselves, happy, healthy, wise, everything under the stars, we can all we can all grow, and then the reputation will follow suit.
That is a great way to put it. And the best way to get a reputation that represents who you truly are is to be who you truly are.
Hmm.
And then you can use that framework as a way to grow. If you are who you really are and you get, I don't know, some negative reputation, and then you figure that out, you can use that negative reputation to find your weak points and to grow and overcome some of your shortcomings, I guess,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
right.
So
And
while a negative reputation may immediately be harmful, you can use it as an itinerary, I guess,
mhm,
of places of yourself that you can improve.
right. Um, I don't know. It's just it's weird to talk about something like reputation where the entire concept is objectively out of your control, but that's kind of the whole show idea is let's let's take back the control, you know? Like
Yeah.
let's have control over our lives. And I don't know, sometimes I guess you as an individual just have to gauge whether it's important to listen to a reputation that you have because again, you know yourself more than others know you. So if somebody views you in a way that's just like simply not how you are and you know that, then don't believe it to be true because you know that it's not true, you know? So rule that one out. But maybe if there's a reputation that you have that like everything's good but there's one bad thing, it's like if this is a justified like almost examination of you, just evaluate it properly, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah. I guess with that said, just because I don't want to keep hammering in the like the same idea. Um I guess we can just start closing it here.
Sure.
I think we talked about a lot of great stuff, Ryan. And seriously, man, thanks for coming on here. It's been a pleasure.
I mean, the pleasure is all mine, Casey. Truly.
I'm glad to hear it. Before we end things off, would you like to give us a plug of what you do and who you are and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Ryan. Most people know me as internet sensation, nan0wav. I compose electronic music in my free time. Gonna go to college for that soon. You should listen to and possibly buy my music. It's been playing in the background of this episode the whole time, hopefully. And yeah, that's me.
All right, sounds good. If you're curious about Ryan's works, I'll link some links in the description. And anyway, this has been the Reputation episode of Culmination. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. And I'll see you guys next time.